The American dream is built on freedom, and that freedom comes at a cost. American Heroes Stories, presented by Life, Liberty, Happiness, is a new series honoring the men and women who've sacrificed to protect that dream. We're proud to play a small part in preserving their stories for future generations. Life, Liberty, Happiness, a Media Squatch podcast presents American Heroes Stories.
All right, everybody. We would like to welcome to the program Virginia National Guard Captain Randy Krantz, or as most people in Bedford know him, the Honorable Judge Krantz. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank y'all for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So kind of tell everybody where you're from originally, where it all started.
Well, I grew up here in Bedford, Virginia, literally about 3 blocks over off of Park Street.
Oh, really?
Here in Bedford. My parents both worked at Rubatex.
Mm-hmm.
So went to school here in Bedford from Bedford Primary through the elementary school and then to Liberty High School.
Okay.
I graduated high school in 1978. Was thinking about doing a medical career. I was really eat up with a TV show back then in the 70s called Emergency with about the paramedics. And so I, after high school, I went to community college in Roanoke at Virginia Western and got a professional nursing degree and my paramedic license and worked as a paramedic and as an RN in the emergency room at the hospital in Roanoke at the trauma center.
Okay. How long did you do that before you ended up joining the National Guard there?
So let's see. I graduated from nursing school in 1981 and worked through about 1990 and joined the National Guard in 1988 when I decided to go to law school because I was gravitating from the clinical practice of nursing to administration. And I was encouraged to get a law degree to maybe do hospital administration was the initial plan.
Oh, wow.
But I continued to work as an RN while I was going to law school. So from 1987 to 1990, I went to law school at the University of Richmond. I was married. I had a 15-month-old daughter and a newborn son. And so I commuted from Bedford to Richmond each week and would come home. I'd be in Richmond during the week for classes and come home on the weekends and work in the emergency room here at Bedford Hospital. I'd work 2 12-hour shifts on Saturday and Sunday and get up dark 30 on Monday mornings and drive back to Richmond and wash, rinse, repeat.
Yeah.
But I joined the National Guard to quite honestly to help finance law school.
Okay.
But because I had a nursing degree, I could get a direct commission, and I was commissioned in the Army Nurse Corps as a second lieutenant initially, and but was assigned to the Lynchburg 2nd 116th of the 29th Division as a medical platoon leader. So I was a medical officer, nursing officer rather, in an infantry battalion, but as a medical platoon leader. So I commanded a combat medics and an ambulance squad.
What's the training like for like when you join the Virginia National Guards? What's that training process look like?
Initially, the first training round was an officer basic course, and that was at Fort Sam Houston, which is the Army Medical Center. What's called AMED, or back then was called AMED. That's where all the medical specialists are trained. Starting out, everything from physical training to how to wear the uniform, how to salute.
Okay.
The basic military drill. Went through that, and then after that, the specialty courses for combat medicine, some advanced training in trauma medicine and trauma nursing. Um, I could have been assigned to a hospital, like a military hospital, as a
Mhm.
reservist National Guardsman, but they worked it out because I lived in Bedford to let me go to one of the field units, an infantry unit. Um, as you know, Bedford had the D-Day boys from Company A. Lynchburg was the headquarters company,
Okay.
and the medical unit was within that company, was a platoon within that company. And so I got to be an officer in an infantry unit commanding that medical platoon. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Had a great bunch of young men and women who were skilled and trained in combat medicine, corpsmen.
Hmm.
And my primary duties was their supervision, but also to make sure they were properly trained.
And what's the commitment for that? So you've done the training, and then what's the commitment after that point?
So it's a minimum of 2 weekends a month. I mean, excuse me, 1 weekend a month,
Hmm.
and then 2 weeks in the summer of active duty.
And do you know what that's going to look like before you get your 2 weeks, or you find out pretty much once you get there?
Pretty much the training calendar is pushed out a year ahead in advance.
Okay.
So there's always some changes,
Hmm.
but pretty much I knew when the weekends fell, and I knew when the 2 weeks would fall. And then as I was going to law school, there was no classes in the summer, so the 2 weeks were not uh, bad to do because I didn't have to arrange and take a vacation from full time employment.
Sure.
But once I graduated and was working full time, then you had to coordinate your vacation with the 2 weeks. And many of the employers that I had were very gracious and given some flexibility. Sometimes it would stretch into a third week if there was additional training or accomplishments that you needed to do. But basically, a weekend a month, 2 weeks in the summer.
Excuse my ignorance on this, but when it comes to the National Guard, like, where do the orders come from at that point? I mean, like with the guests we've had on previous, they would say the orders came from General this or whatever. What did Virginia National Guard orders come from?
Well, there's a chain of command. There's even the chain of command. There's a National Guard commander or chief at the Pentagon in
Okay.
Washington.
I did not know that.
And then each state's National Guard falls under the commander in chief, which is the governor.
Okay.
So primarily we're a state asset, but that can be federalized. So the official thing, it's the Virginia Army National Guard. So you're part of the Army, but you're in the National Guard, which is different than being in the Army Reserve, because initially we fall under a state chain of command all the way up to the adjutant general. There's a general over the Virginia Army National Guard
Okay.
who answers to the governor. And then there's a command structure at the Pentagon of all the National Guard units through all the 50 states and territories.
So is there at any point in time would the Virginia National Guards ever have to serve overseas or anything like that?
Well, certainly. And of course, the best example was back during World War II with the D-Day invasion.
Okay.
The Virginia Army National Guard here in Bedford was Company A
Okay.
of the 2nd and 116th.
I did not know that.
Of the 2nd and 116th, and which was all part of the 29th Infantry Division. And the 29th Infantry Division history goes all the way back to the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
The symbol for the 29th Infantry Division is the yin and yang symbol, the blue and the gray, which historically the legend goes is that at the end of the Civil War, the Virginia and the Maryland troops swapped pieces of their uniform, blue and the gray, and then they merged together after the war into the Virginia Maryland National Guard.
Wow.
And so we're the 29th Infantry Division, so you'll see them wearing that blue and gray patch.
Mm-hmm.
And then a division is divided into companies, Company A, Company B, Company C, and then a headquarters company. And the Bedford National Guard troops were Company A, so they got activated during World War II.
Wow.
And of course, many of them were killed in D-Day, which is why the National D-Day Memorial is. But yes, any National Guard unit can be federalized and called to active duty,
I did not know that.
or called to active duty for state emergencies,
Sure.
everything from disasters. I think it was 1988. It was right as I was processing in. I had not processed in time to go. But in Virginia Beach, during one summer, they had some riots in Virginia Beach, and the National Guard units were mobilized to keep the peace. Um, after I came in 1988, in 1990, it was interesting. I'd graduated from law school in May of 1990, took the bar exam in July of 1990, was waiting on the results, and 2 or 3 days after the bar exam, our unit was scheduled to go for our 2 weeks. Our mobilization point was at Fort Bragg.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so with different training.
Yeah.
And it was while we were at Fort Bragg that Desert Storm started.
Yeah. Oof.
And so that was our all these Virginia National Guardsmen there in green uniforms, and all of a sudden we start seeing active duty soldiers in brown uniforms, and we wasn't sure what that was about because we were out in the field training. Our family members back home knew more of what was going on because they were watching CNN.
Wow.
And we didn't know. I don't think we got federalized. I think we got held over a week to see what was going to happen, and then we were released but told to be ready. Wow. Because one of the missions then of the 29th, I'm thinking back, was to backfill the 82nd at Fort Bragg. If they moved out, then we would move into the base and assume those duties. But that didn't happen. But we did get to see everybody else going over to Kuwait,
right,
in the first Desert Storm. And so, yes, Virginia National Guard or any state can be mobilized for a state emergency, a local emergency, or be pulled into the active army.
When did you make the transition from medic over to, you did some JAG stuff, is that right?
So when I the original reason I thought about and decided to go to law school was thinking that I would transition from clinical nursing and trauma practice to administration. And so when I graduated law school in 90 with my law degree, I still wasn't sure that I was going to practice law. In fact, the very first job that I was offered after law school was to be an assistant hospital administrator manager at a hospital. And I also got a chance to join a small law firm doing healthcare law practice.
Okay.
And it occurred to me that if you're going to do administration, you might want to get some other clinical experience of practicing law under your belt. Healthcare is just being so legally regulated and rules and regulations. I thought that would be helpful. So I decided to practice. As I said, took the bar exam, passed it, and went to work with a small law firm in Roanoke for 2 years. And then came to the Bedford Commonwealth Attorney's Office as an assistant Commonwealth attorney. And that was from 1992 to 95 that I was an assistant. In Virginia, we call them Commonwealth attorneys. Other states, they're district attorneys, but we're prosecutors. And I got assigned by my boss, who was a Commonwealth attorney then, Jim Updike. He wanted to have 2 assistant Commonwealth attorneys, one doing mainly vice and drug-related cases, and the other one doing violent crimes. And I got tasked with doing the violent crimes. So I spent 3 years prosecuting homicides, robberies, sexual assaults, crimes against children. And there was a lot of overlap between doing that type of law and the medical nursing experience.
Okay.
In fact, being part of a trauma team, you're part of a multidisciplinary team that you have to work together with other medical specialists. Prosecuting violent crimes, I was given the leeway to put together a multidisciplinary team called the Violent Crimes Response Team that we formed here in Bedford in the mid-90s. And prosecutors, police officers, detectives, forensic scientists, we had profilers or behavioral analysis, and some of the same skills working in a medical multidisciplinary team transferred over readily to the violent crimes. And of course, a lot of them had medical issues, injuries, autopsies, that sort of thing. And I did that until 1995, until then when I became the Commonwealth's attorney.
Okay.
Judge Jim Updike went on the bench, became a judge. I got assigned to fill his term, had to run in an election. I'd never been in a political contest in my life.
Mm.
But about that time, I branch transferred to the Judge Advocate Corps in the Virginia National Guard.
Okay.
And was transferred from the Lynchburg Field Unit, 2nd and 116th, to Division Headquarters at Fort Belvoir in Alexandria, where the 29th Division Headquarters was.
Okay.
And I was assigned to the Judge Advocate staff and was made Chief of Criminal Law for the 29th Division for Virginia and Maryland. And so I did military prosecutions within the Virginia National Guard.
Oh, wow. So, I mean, what does, and just because I've never heard or seen it, what does a military prosecution look like? What is that?
Well, just like any other prosecution, it can range from what is called non-judicial punishment or informal punishment of just keeping internal discipline within the units. The command staff, the commander of the military unit, has a lot of say and oversight of criminal prosecutions. But it can range to prosecuting domestic violence, murder cases, theft of military equipment, drug use.
So this would be like military police arresting someone, and then it's going through the process.
Correct. So as a criminal prosecutor or a prosecutor of crime in the Army National Guard, we work very closely with the military police and the Army's Criminal Investigative Division. So it would literally be during the week I'd be a state prosecutor, and then on the weekends I'd be a military prosecutor.
Wow.
You prosecuted under different laws. For example, under the state law, it would be the Virginia Code. But in the military, it's the Uniform Code of Military Justice, the UMCJ. And they have their own body of laws defining the crimes, the penalties. And like I said, they can range from informal actions all the way up to full military trials.
Do you ever find yourself, when you're prosecuting, is there more leeway as a prosecutor in the military than there is on the civil side? Does a defendant have less freedom on the military side than they do on the civil side? And did you find yourself crossing paths and going, oh yeah, we can't do that here?
It's interesting. That's a very interesting question. I found the military criminal justice process to be very fair, very clean. There were high standards. You not only had to meet the legal standards, you also had to have in your back of your mind maintaining proper military order. So, a judge advocate general, you had your own military rank. I got promoted to captain by the time I went to the JAG Corps. But you might find yourself prosecuting a colonel or a major.
Oh, wow. I never thought of that.
And so the structure would be, if at the 29th Division, there was a general that was the commander of the 29th Division, usually maybe a 2-star general. And then he would have the general staff, and he would have staff officers ranging from security, transportation, intelligence, medical, personnel, and there would be these other officers, usually sometimes lieutenant colonels or majors on his staff. And then also on that staff, there would be the Judge Advocate General, the SGA, the Staff Judge Advocate, who was the legal advisor to the division commander.
Okay.
And under most Army protocols, a division commander would delegate to the Staff Judge Advocate and his staff to handle military justice issues.
So is the court on a base? Okay.
Yeah, on 29th, we had a courthouse,
a
military courthouse.
I hate to sound like it's a side of the military that I don't know that I know much about. Do you, Trent?
Not greatly, thank goodness. I mean, we lived in Fort Belvoir. We just never got in trouble.
Well, I mean, I guess the common thing that you would think of would be someone going AWOL, right?
A lot of things are like that. I mean, being the weekends prosecutors per se. Large majority of our cases were minor offenses. They were serious when it came to good order and discipline, like positive drug tests.
Mm.
Unfortunately, you had sometimes the theft of military equipment.
Oh, wow.
Things would disappear or be sold.
Sure.
So that took up a lot of time. Soldiers, AWOL.
Yeah.
Sometimes we would have administrative discharge hearings. Should the person be separated from the service with less than an honorable discharge? So the due process that was allowed in those cases. But sometimes, we prosecuted assaults, sexual assaults.
I mean, living on a military base is its own city. Its own town. So you have the same, they just have a different judicial system to take care of it themselves. Yeah.
Wow. As a civilian, I mean, Trent grew up in a military home and on a base, right?
Mm-hmm.
You were at Camp Lejeune, pretty much?
Lejeune, Cherry Point.
So I'm just, I mean, a civilian my whole life. You hear of it, but you don't know how that process looks. So this is interesting to me because I'm like, I have no idea how this works.
Not exactly, but very parallel as a JAG officer, judge advocate, prosecutor. Now, in our section, in the judge advocate department, if you would, where we called it the shop, our shop, you had attorneys. There was the chief of family law, the chief of international law, the chief of logistics, and, all of those things. And we had to coordinate. And then, of course, some JAG officers become military judges.
Okay.
So, you can rise to that. But there were some instances where we were cross-designated as assistant United States attorneys. So we could, depending on what the situation was, it was theoretically possible either to prosecute someone through the military system or to prosecute them in federal court.
Oh, wow.
And so sometimes we worked cooperatively with the Department of Justice. Okay, especially if something crossed state lines, or when the National Guard units were on deployment or sent overseas, then there may not be one home jurisdiction. You would figure that out where the best place. But I thoroughly enjoy. I found the JAG system scrupulously fair at the level that I was at. We didn't hide the ball. If we had put a case together against a defendant, their defense attorney, which could also be a JAG officer, you see, we would say, "Here's the evidence."
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Here it is, and the procedure might sound a little different, but the basic concept was the same as if in federal court.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was, if at the trial level, if somebody was convicted, they had the opportunity. There's just like you have the trial court, then the Court of Appeals, then the Supreme Court kind of structure. In the military, there's the trial court and the Military Court of Appeals in Washington. And so they can appeal the case all the way up through that system into the higher courts. And a lot of times, depending on what it was, we could refer a military personnel to state prosecution. We could say, okay, we're going to defer to the state because they may have had concurrent jurisdiction. It just sort of common sense, logistical, tactical decisions that we would make. A large part of my duties when I wasn't in court was to make rounds to the field units to give legal advice to the field commanders. So sometimes the military discipline would take place at the local level in the local National Guard unit, and the JAG officer could hold hearings and make a decision. Because the whole Uniform Code of Military Justice was designed that it could be done by any officer that didn't have to be a lawyer. So part of military officer training, you got some training and experience in the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So sometimes the commanders would want to do their own process. We would just give legal advice to make sure they stayed within the guardrails. And so sometimes I would travel, start on Friday evening at a National Guard unit in Richmond area, and by Sunday morning be in Tazewell, Virginia, as you made your rounds. And so I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I stayed in the JAG until 1998 when I came out.
Wow. Yeah.
So from 88 to 98, between Army Nurse Medical Service and JAG.
I wanted to ask you about the Army, the nursing that you did there.
Mhm.
You had mentioned that you had been in the ER, the nursing room, for maybe 8, 9 years,
Mhm.
right before you joined the National Guard.
Mhm.
Did you find yourself? Are you older than the rest of the people that are being trained? And have you had enough experience that you're actually helping train the people that are training you? I mean,
Um,
That's
I
a
mean,
good
you
question.
had some really hands-on experience. Probably a lot of them may not have had.
well, it's very possible. I joined probably the biggest thing for me that got me started is I joined the Bedford Rescue Squad when I was 16.
Mm.
Mm.
At that time, you could it was all volunteer, but you could join at 16. I was a junior and somewhere between my sophomore and junior year in high school. You had to have your driver's license
Mhm.
and you had to have your EMT certificate, emergency medical. And I was able to do that and join the rescue squad. So from before I went to nursing school, I had 4 or 5 years of experience working as an EMT and then
Mhm.
as an advanced EMT. And while going to nursing school, also got my paramedic certification. And the paramedic is an advanced level of care, equal or that exceeds an Army corpsman as far as
Mm.
level of
Mhm.
training. Paramedic can administer medicine, start IVs, use a defibrillator, put emergency airways in, all those sorts of things. And so by the time I graduated nursing school, I had that experience. But the best experience, I worked at Community Hospital in Roanoke, right off of Interstate 581, and was part of the team that helped the hospital, or was when it was happening, rather get their certification as a trauma center.
Mhm.
So what we were trained to do in the emergency room was to be a mass unit.
Mm.
Oh, wow.
So when the patient arrives, say off out of a car crash or a
Yeah.
gunshot wound in the ER, was to deliver that emergency trauma care within what was called the golden hour.
Mm.
What we learned from Korea and Vietnam War is the more seriously injured soldiers, the ones that were the most critically injured, had a better chance of survival if you got them to a surgical hospital where you could do rapid intervention
Mm.
within a golden hour. You had a golden hour of 60 minutes. Even if you didn't do that, even if they survived the initial insult, the gunshots, the explosions, the trauma, they would die weeks later from secondary complications
Wow.
because they were in shock for so long.
Yeah.
If you could air evac them over the field units to a definitive surgical hospital, a MASH unit it was called, or combat support hospital, uh, the survival rate went up. We learned that at the end of World War II in Korea when we started using helicopters.
Wow.
So by the Vietnam really came into play. Um, there was a clinical scenario where soldiers shot and wounded, and he doesn't get the definitive care, but he survives.
Mhm.
Um, it actually had a name. It was called Da Nang Lung from Da Nang in Vietnam.
Yeah.
Da Nang Lung was, even if they survived the initial insult, they would go into respiratory failure weeks later because
Mm.
their body just couldn't handle the trauma. They would survive, but not for long. But if you got them to a hospital where you could get in and do the surgical intervention, they had a higher rate. So the idea of civilian trauma centers was that rapid evac, even by helicopter or ground ambulance, and you had the surgical teams in the emergency room or available so that you could get them to the operating room quick.
Oh.
And so that's what I did for that 7 or 8 years. Well, actually, through going to law school and worked at part of a multidisciplinary team that would evaluate, assess, and intervene. And the goal was to get them to the operating room to fix the injuries or slow the bleeding or to
Mhm.
restore the function
Wow.
within that golden hour. And that became a term of art, the golden hour.
Wow.
And so when in the medic side, most of the medics that I were training, their initial Army medic enlisted person's basic training is an EMT course.
Mm.
So they were going through basic, what I'd gone through, but 16, 17 years old. And then they could advance up to more advanced levels of care.
Sure.
And a fully trained military corpsman is, I would say, is almost, if not equally equivalent to a physician's assistant. They can make very definitive treatment because they may be the only medical asset
Yeah.
absent the rapid evacuation by helicopter. So when I was doing that, I got to work in the ER, also be a flight nurse on the helicopter. You know,
Wow.
either going out, bringing them in, or being there when they got there. Thoroughly enjoyed that.
So when you get out of the military at that point, where I shouldn't say got out, when you were done with the National Guard, you're still the Commonwealth attorney at that point?
I was still the Commonwealth's attorney, so I was still doing criminal prosecution.
Mm-hmm.
Around about the time that I got out is when we in Bedford, as I said, we had formed the same concept as the trauma team, but a violent crimes response team. And that allowed us, our sheriff's department, Sheriff Brown,
Mm-hmm.
back then, working closely with his office, we applied and received a grant to develop what was called a Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force.
Oh, yes.
And that was around about that same time. And we used to joke about it. The first grants that went out for about 10 sites across the nation, I can't remember them exactly, but they were like New York, Broward County, Florida, Los Angeles,
Yeah.
Seattle, Bedford.
Yeah.
And but I think the reason we were competitive in that first round of grants was that we had already showed that we could pull together an effective team.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was very rewarding. And so when we first formed the Bedford Internet Crimes Against Children, it was designed to be a regional task force, not just confined to Bedford. You had the function of solving the internet crimes, the child exploitation, but also training up other task forces within the region.
Sure.
So it was both delivery and training. And the code name back then was Operation Blue Ridge Thunder.
Yeah.
I do remember.
And then now, so Virginia was divided into two main task forces, one Northern Virginia area, which was run through the Virginia State Police, and then the Southern Virginia Internet Crimes Task Force, which was run through the Bedford County Sheriff's Department. And so we did that. We had our violent crime team, the Internet Crimes. We also formed a cold case squad, and there was about half a dozen or so unsolved homicides from, stretching back into the early 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And we formed a team. We found the team. I think if I learned one thing, both from the medicine and the law, that what makes things work is communication, coordination, and cooperation. If you can get good people on a noble mission working together, you can get a lot of things done.
Mm-hmm.
And we did that. We were able to solve or resolve some of the cold cases. And so I stayed as the chief prosecutor of the Commonwealth Attorney till 2016, and to my surprise, got nominated to go on the bench as a judge. It's not something
it's not something you set out to do.
I did not. I enjoyed what I was doing. I was very blessed. And, I think the biggest reward professionally is if you can do something honorable and good in the hometown that you grew up in.
Agreed.
And I used to joke to people, they said, well, what's it like being Commonwealth's attorney? I said, well, some days I had to be Andy Griffith and other days I had to be Matt Dillon. But it was just how to deal with people, to call balls and strikes, treat them fairly. People didn't mind you being tough in the law as long as you were fair.
Sure.
And but the opportunity to go on the bench came up. I was approached about it, and agreed. And I went on the bench in 2016, and I thoroughly enjoy what I'm doing now. And I'm in my second term. Judges, we're not appointed for life in the state like in the federal court for fixed terms. And then you have to be reappointed by the legislature when your term is over.
Does politics get involved into that at all? Maybe
small p politics, and in that it's a legislative process.
Sure.
So the whole idea of advice and consent.
Yeah,
that's the more cynical politics. I have not experienced that.
Okay, good.
There used to be an old joke said, if you want to be a judge, be ready to be traded for a bridge. You know, you might get traded for somebody's highway.
Yeah.
I've never seen that or experienced that.
Sure.
We're very fortunate with our legislative delegation statewide. I think they take the judicial nominations very seriously. Um, and even when there's some disagreement, I think they handle it very honorably the way they
Well, that's
do it.
good to know that we still have that.
Yes,
So you also teach as well?
I do.
Okay.
I do. So before I went to law school, and again, that's sort of how it happened. As I got a full-time teaching appointment at what was called the College of Health Sciences in Rome, Jefferson College of Health Sciences, and it was a private community college, part of the Carilion Hospital system, and they had programs to get your associate's degree in nursing, respiratory therapy, or your associate's degree as a paramedic. And as an RN and paramedic, I started out as the clinical director for that program, arranging the clinical rotations of the paramedics as they rotated through the hospital and into the field with the paramedic units. And then eventually became the director of the program. So right before going to law school, I'd been director of the paramedic program, training program in Roanoke.
Wow.
The college is now part of Radford University.
Okay.
It's Radford Carilion University there. And they offer even master's degrees now. And so I was teaching full time right before I went to law school, and to get tenured, you needed to get your doctoral degree. And by that time I had a bachelor's degree. The dean of the college said, "Well, what are you going to do about getting your doctoral degree?" And I had some good advice. I said, "Well, why don't you get your doctorate in law and hospital administration and combine the clinical part of nursing medicine with administration?" Because what I was teaching at the college was medical ethics and risk management, and how to design emergency medical systems. What do you have to do to design a rural EMS system, or an urban system, or a port system, or a mountain system? That design, the rules, regulations. And so law school was a natural fit. But I've always enjoyed teaching, and so I teach now at Liberty University. I teach in the School of Nursing. I teach in the master's program. I teach health policy and ethics to nurses getting their master's degree. And just recently, I've been teaching a class in the PhD program, because Liberty you can get your PhD in nursing health policy and ethics.
Oh, wow.
And so I teach in those courses. And then I teach trial advocacy, how to do trials to law students.
So did you retire from the bench to do all this?
I'm still doing that.
Man, how do you, this guy? I don't know. I've written so many things down. I don't know if I've ever written this many things down. I don't know.
Randy gets bored quickly.
Good grief.
Some degree of schizophrenia. Or something. It works really well. So, for example, in Liberty, I teach in an evening. I teach an evening class.
Sure.
And it's usually on the day that I'm on the bench in Lynchburg, so I can go from the Lynchburg courthouse over to the campus.
Wow.
And then so it works.
Yeah,
it works well. I thoroughly enjoy
it. I think about when you become a judge, sort of like, and I don't mean to use this analogy; it's bad, but refereeing, you're pretty much supposed to be right the day you start refereeing. Doesn't matter what level you're at. When you become a judge, you're not. It's not like you get to go through practice rounds. You're attorney, judge, and I mean
that. You're 100% correct. The very first, so there is a judicial training program. A lot of it, some of the administrative issues, the finance issues you deal with as a judge. A lot of emphasis on the judicial canons of ethics, the do's and don'ts of being a judge, conflicts of interest, not allowing yourself to be swayed outside of the courtroom type things.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to find yourself extricating yourself from conversations. And so those sorts of things. But that's part of the orientation. You, in my opinion, you either have that internal
Yeah.
compass. But sometimes you need the training just to be more situationally aware. So they do a good job of that. But you're correct. There's no practice round. The judicial orientation is a week long.
Right.
And then they'd give us some scenarios to problem solve in that week. It's what was helpful. And then we go back each year for refresher training at our judicial conference. But the very first day that I went to the bench, because I'd been the Commonwealth's attorney in Bedford, for a year, I couldn't hear criminal cases in Bedford because they may have been cases I had touched or known about or been aware of when I was in that role. So it wouldn't have been right for me to sit on the bench and then in a different role. So I spent a lot of time the first year sitting in other jurisdictions. So the very first day that I had to report was in Lynchburg. And in the way the judges' chambers are, you have your desk and your bookshelves and nice little office. But you come around your desk and you have to walk up like 2 or 3 steps. And you open the door and you're coming into the back of the bench. You're entering the courtroom. And I can remember walking up. My very first day was to hear civil disputes. And I'd been doing criminal prosecutions for over 20-some years. And you'd done your homework. They told you what to prepare for. So you'd done the homework and reading and the research and that sort of thing. But I will never forget, as I got ready to open the door, I remember I reached out to open the door and then I shut it back. I said, wait a minute, what am I getting ready to do?
Yeah.
And so you become humble pretty quick.
Yeah.
But what I found, even now, I'm in my 8th, going on my 9th year now, it is okay to say you don't know something.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things the judges depend on is the lawyers presenting the issues to them.
Mm-hmm.
And many times, as you do it more, you have to maybe do it less. But initially, it's perfectly okay to be honest and straightforward and say, counsel, I'm going to need to research that.
Yeah.
Or brief it for me.
And we also, I guess there's an appeal process, right? So if you were wrong, there's a chance that you can learn from that to know
It
not to be wrong in the
absolutely is.
last one. Engineering, and that's what I do for a living. We have had bridges fall down where we designed
That's
something and
exactly
thought it was right, but the next one we build correctly, it's called establishing
process,
a career. Yeah. So, we got a beautiful system, I think, that there is that appeal process in case you were wrong.
It's all part. I think the biggest takeaway from the administration of justice, criminal or civil, or family court, is you first have to recognize that every human being is fallible. And so what our system bakes into the process is that checks and balance. It's not perfect. But every Thursday morning in Bedford, I have about anywhere from 25 to 30 people come into the courtroom who've been charged with offenses. They've been released on bail, and they're coming in to be advised of their rights and whether or not they want an attorney. And 2 things that I stress to them as I go through and explain their rights, I essentially explain to them the Bill of Rights. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to counsel. You have the right to subpoena witnesses. You have the right to an open public trial. You have the right to disagree with the court through the appeals process. But then what I tell them, one of the things we have to realize as a community, there is no such thing as a right without a co-equal responsibility. And I said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, if you have the right to remain silent, you have the responsibility to be careful who you talk to. If you have the right to an attorney, you've either got to hire one, be your own attorney, or see if you qualify for a court appointed. And then I get it down very practical. I say, if you've got the right to use the court to subpoena witnesses in your defense, you have the responsibility to get to the court on time, the names and addresses of the witness.
Yeah.
And what I'm trying to connect up in their minds is each step of the process is a decision to be made, and each decision is going to have some repercussion to it. And then by the time we get to the end of that presentation, at least my hope is there's somewhat of a more informed citizenry. And I always end it by telling them, no matter how guilty you are, because right now you're the only one that knows whether you're guilty. I don't know.
Right.
You have the presumption of innocence. But no matter how guilty you are, you have the fundamental right as a human being to be treated with dignity and respect in this courtroom.
Wow.
In order to get respect, you have to give it.
Yep.
And I've had people tell me that they've never heard that before. They've never connected in their minds rights and responsibilities,
Sure.
or that respect is two-way. But I have many of them come back and said that is so old it sounds new again.
Oh, wow.
And we go through that every week.
So you've hit on something, and Brian alluded to it before, that we had a little court fiasco that we had to deal with one time. And then I had another one last year, just 55 and still dumb. But I've been to court twice in my 55 years.
Right.
And the last two was the only two were in the last 5 years. Well, no, actually when I was 16, that was at one in Camp Lejeune. But I was floored, and you don't have to say it, and I'm just asking this question. You obviously have the right to say you don't want to answer that, or you can't. But I was floored by the people that came to court, what they looked like literally short shorts.
Yeah.
That I wouldn't have my daughter wear at a restaurant. All right. There's no way we're going out if you're wearing that. And they came dressed like that. And you talked about respect and gaining respect. To me, there's at least you're going to see a judge that's going to make a decision. And I was just disappointed. And I thought, and maybe it's because I grew up in the military family and a military court. Is there a difference between the two if you were to walk into one and the other, and one's in uniform and the people in the crowd?
Generally, there shouldn't be. Of course, in the military, there's prescribed dress codes. Military uniform. I can remember even when I first started practicing law and did a little bit of private practice, I would tell my clients, dress for court like you would dress for church.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. That reference just doesn't ring much anymore. So what we're finding is that in most courts, there's a dress code that we have to publish. And so when we send out the court papers, it says no tank tops, no midriffs, no pajamas, no bedroom shoes, etc. What we have to be conscious of, however, is why do we have a dress code? It is, you either set a tone that is respectful to the people in front of you, but if you don't set the proper tone, the respect breaks down. Now, that being said, what we also have to be conscious of is we service a wide socioeconomic spectrum. And so judges, I think, are pretty sensitive to someone who, what they may be wearing, you might go, well, I wouldn't wear that, but it may be the best they have.
Sure.
And so you're trying to distinguish that. On the other hand, I'll just say every now and then there are some visual challenges in the courtroom, and I have had to ask people to step outside and address that issue.
Sure.
Some people will try to challenge you with so we usually don't allow them to have something obscene.
Sure.
We have to balance that against freedom of speech. But at the same time, the more, for lack of a better word, the more revealing, risque things, we try to address through a written dress code that we publish. If they don't follow it, they run the risk of not having their case heard that day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Or possibly even being found in contempt.
But on the other hand, you have there is a code for law enforcement too, right? I mean, they have to, they can't show up in plain clothes, right? I mean, they have,
no, if they're a detective, they still have to be dressed professionally. A good rule of thumb, I think today, someone come to court, business casual, versus what you would wear to the beach.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And somewhere in between, there's the right tone. An older judge told me when I went on the bench, he said, the two things you want to avoid on the bench is being embarrassed and embarrassing someone else. And so I'll just say this, there's lots of room for teaching moments in the courtroom.
Sure.
Yeah.
And most of the time, the bailiffs, I am so thankful for all of our sheriff's department bailiffs in all the jurisdictions. They maintain the order and discipline in the courtroom, and many times they will catch those issues and deal with them. And I may not ever even be aware of it.
Wow.
So I'm very thankful for them.
That's good.
Well, we've taken up a lot of your time today. We do appreciate you coming in. Before you leave, though, we always end our show with our guest asking or answering this question. If you could pick one person in history, no matter past, present, whenever, who would you choose and where would you hang out with them for 24 hours?
Other than Christ, I would pick C.S. Lewis.
Oh, man.
Oh, wow.
It's the first time we've ever had that answer.
I am a huge C.S. Lewis fan. In the ethics classes that I teach, I have a section on it called Law and Literature, and we look at some of his writings to glean ethical principles and precepts. Both his fiction and nonfiction I thoroughly love. In fact, when I leave here tonight, I'm going to a church life group that I'm leading, and we're doing the Screw Tape Letters, C.S. Lewis's Screw Tape Letters, as a Bible study. But C.S. Lewis had a group of friends. One of his best friends was J.R.R. Tolkien, who wrote Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
So you had Lewis, who wrote Chronicles of Narnia, and you had Lewis that wrote Lord of the Rings, and they were friends, one Protestant, one Catholic, and they and a group of writers during the 30s and 40s hung out at a pub in England called the Eagle and the Child, and they met every week at a certain time, and they discussed their works, and that's how those great authors started.
Oh, wow.
I would love to be able to go. They nicknamed that pub. It was called the Eagle and the Child. It was right outside of Oxford, and they nicknamed it the Bird and the Baby. I would love to go back and just spend one afternoon hearing them talk to them.
Oh, sure. Yeah. All right. Well, we appreciate you being on the program, and good luck to you. And thank you again.
Thank y'all. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much.